this opportunity to share my thoughts on the important issue of policy responses for eradicating poverty and inequality and reducing the inequality. There are a number of policy reforms which we would like to suggest, and even the Director General has pointed out, the report of Director General has pointed out the same. However, I would like to concentrate more on the labor market reforms, and towards that, I would like to highlight three very important issues which the government should undertake and should take up is development of rural employment and the rural areas, then the formalization of informal economy, and development and expansion of social protection. I'll just like to talk a bit more about the rural employment. As we all know, the economies in the Asia and Pacific are characterized by large rural sector, and even in India, 68% of population is rural and 48% of workforce is in agriculture. India has had a history of rural development program which are aimed at poverty alleviation, improving rural livelihood, and equitable and sustainable growth in rural areas. The public employment programs have been in vogue since 1990s, and millions have been drifted, and this has been a very successful program of the country. Millions have been lifted out of the abject poverty in the country. It has improved the bargaining powers of the workers, especially the migrant workers. It has reduced migration. It has led to upward pressure on the working conditions that are available to the workers. It has reduced the exploitation of at work, and also apart created public assets and infrastructure in the community assets which have had a multiplier effect in the development of the economy of the rural sector. Then we have had livelihood augmentation program, wherein microfinances have been and subsidies have been provided to rural workers for asset creation and income augmentation. However, in the last 20 years, since the 20 to 30 years they have been in vogue, the learning from them has been the issue of viability of such microfinances, individual microfinances to persons. What we have learned is that every person cannot be an entrepreneur, and every person cannot become start up an income generating activity on his own. There will be persons who will require wage employment in the area. And the second issue which we have learned from this is that that unless the extension and the linkages services are provided for such activities, then this program is more likely to have difficulties. Then we have had social assistance programs like old age pensions for poor and destitutes, widow pensions, housing assistance again for poor, a number of such programs. However, the experience and learning from these programs have been the issue of identification of such workers. It has been a very difficult process, and quite more often than not, the correct and the most needy persons may or may not get identified. The inadequacy of the public funding required for running these programs is another issue of concern that has remained, and an augmentation of such resources from the government is a matter of priority. In the current scenario, now we come to the current situation. In the current scenario, what we have seen is that there has been an increased penetration of mobile and internet services in rural areas in our country, and there has been a basic literacy amongst the rural youth on account of the right to education that has been initiated by the country about 10 years back. And this, we feel, needs to be harnessed to make the policy interventions in rural sector more targeted and more transparent and better. For example, government has recently launched a mobile app and SMS service for improving the productivity of farm sectors, where through these services, the technology dissemination or farming skills improvement, or extension services, or weather or market related information is being provided to the farmers, and what we have found is that this has been very popular and very useful in our rural areas. Through these ICT applications, we have strengthened the employment services program. About 10 years back, we have enacted a law for employment guarantee scheme, wherein we provide for any person who wants an employment in rural area, we provide a minimum 100-day employment in a year. A guarantee that is guaranteed. And this program has been strengthened further, wherein we have converged it with the unique identification system which we have launched, which the country has launched. And the financial inclusion has been made through opening of their accounts and transferring of benefits into the banks of such workers. And registration of workers again has been done through IT platforms, through IVRS and through mobile services, and such things have been done. Similarly, a national rural livelihood mission have been launched, which promotes rural entrepreneurship. The person who can become an entrepreneur, he is nurtured, and he in turn, the government assists him to build skills in the rural sector, and he in turn provides the employment, the livelihood options within the rural area. There has been number of challenges in developing the rural employment and the rural sector. The informality in the rural sector is a major issue of concern. Small size of farm within the country is again a concern, wherein the technology intervention becomes more difficult in such cases. Although the right to education has been implemented and there is a basic literacy, but the quality of education we need to improve so that the skills of the persons in the rural sector can become better. And the capital investment for irrigation is another concern which we have been facing in our country. Especially it also has environmental impact and also land alienation impact. So the development of irrigation in our country has been a challenge for development of economy in the rural sector. I think I'll stop here, and maybe the rest of the issues we can take later. Thank you. These are fund-based and legislation-based social security systems and are mandatory for all persons having a wage below a ceiling. In respect of informal sector, this constitutes about 85 to 90% of the workforce. The social security is of a major concern for us also. Within this, informal employment within a formal sector gets covered in our legislation, and our legislations do not differentiate between various natures of employment. The principal employer, therefore, is obliged to cover all workers engaged by him, whether formally or informally, directly or indirectly, temporary or permanent, under the social security systems. However, to cover all kinds of employment under the social security system, portability of benefits was an issue, but for this we have introduced a system of universal account number, and this handles the issue of migration, change in employment, etc., and it has led to a very widening of the coverage under the formal sector. We have also had cess-based social security system, wherein cess was levied on certain products such as construction work, BD work or Sene workers, and this cess so collected is constituted into a fund, and it is transferred to that fund, and that social security is provided through that fund. However, the experience have been that these funds have not been very effective due to issues relating to identification of such workers, and also lack of implementation machinery. The weak implementation machinery has been another issue of concern. We have had targeted social security schemes or social of the central government and state governments, wherein the government targets vulnerable groups and provides social security through the government financing. Some examples are Indira Gandhi Old Age Pension Scheme, Widow Pension Scheme, Insurance Scheme for handloom workers, Rashtriya Suraksha Bima Yojana for medical insurance of certain vulnerable section of people, etc. However, these schemes too have issues of identification and of limited funding. In the present government, the government has launched voluntary and optional programs which are subsidized by the government, and introduced many affordable yet market-based instruments for social security, which includes accident cover, sickness cover, and old age pensions. These voluntary and optional schemes such as Prime Minister's Suraksha Bima Yojana, and Prime Minister Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, the citizen can voluntarily contribute to become a member and avail insurance and pension benefits. The Government of India is now contemplating towards a more comprehensive and universal social security framework, and we want to move away from the present fragmented system towards a comprehensive scheme. Under the proposed policy, the social security system, comprehensive social security system would be provided to all workers, all persons in the country under a 4-tiered scheme. At the bottom, for the below poverty line persons who cannot afford to contribute, they will be covered under the social assistance program, and the social security will be funded through the government. The next year, the social security will be part contributory and part subsidized, and in the third tier, the schemes will be fully contributory. These will include workers from formal as well as non-formal sector. Lastly, at the top, there will be voluntary and optional scheme. The comprehensive schemes, the system would be administered through a single setup so that every citizen can avail a floor level of social protection. Recently, the BRICS Employment Forum, in the BRICS Employment Forum, the BRICS inter alia discussed programs and strategies of member countries towards social protection. In the declaration, the BRICS resolved to undertake social protection policies measures in a comprehensive manner, with the particular attention including to those of informal economy and outside the scope of the existing scheme. And with these steps, India is following towards an universalization of social security system, and I hope these kind of systems can be considered as good practices which will be and can be adopted by other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment on any aspect of social protection systems in the region, challenges or good practices? If not, then
Strong
let's
social security for organized sectors, but it's not that the social security is not available for unorganized sector, or social protection is not available for unorganized sector. Yes, in certain cases the systems are weak and the government is taking steps to further strengthen them. As regards the Convention 87 and 94, as you also know and we all know, that in our country the regulations governing trade unions and the industrial relation code and the constitution provides the right of freedom of association to all organizations within the country. The reason why the government is not ratifying 87 and 94, and we have shared this with ILO also, and we have requested ILO for technical assistance on this also, is that the government servants or the government employees do not have this right. We are trying to get some assistance from ILO on this issue, that how do we handle the government servant. We are trying to get that, and as such, for the private sector, for the PSU sector, there is absolutely our laws, our constitution is totally aligned with the Convention 87 and 94. The second question which you also raised was why worker-friendly laws are being diluted. I think you are a bit misinformed. We have no such intention of diluting the worker-friendly labor laws. In fact, the labor law reforms which have been undertaken by our country is for strengthening the labor laws and making them more vibrant and more effective. Thank you. Thank you for this question. Wage policy is a very important policy for our country. And in fact, we are one of the very few countries where real wages get increased from time to time. And we have a tripartite board which recommends the wage increase depending upon the inflation and the prices of the commodity, and based on that the minimum wages within the country gets changed from time to time. And very recently the country has revised the minimum wages by 42% in all sectors, all sectors that are presently covered under the minimum wage system. And now we are contemplating a policy wherein we will that this minimum wage will be applicable for all employment, not particular certain scheduled sector or scheduled employment. So we are considering and contemplating that policy of implementing a minimum wage for all areas and all employments. The second question you had raised was that earlier there was a provision and there was a scheme for granting subsidized food or subsidized ration for the workers. Even today, there is a scheme and there is a system of providing subsidized ration or subsidized food to persons who are below poverty line. And it's a food security scheme which the country is running, and that food security scheme is applicable for persons who are not able to sustain or who are subject to the abject hunger and the poverty. And it is not a universal thing for everybody, and for the remaining, the minimum wage and the periodic revision of minimum wage applies. Thank you. Thank you for taking up this very important policy issue of working poverty and income inequality. And as was discussed in the panel today and from the interventions from all the panelists as well as the audience, what we can actually see is that this issue requires a multi-pronged approach. It requires economic policies, fiscal policies, as well as labor policies. And there are a number of policies, number of issues that need to be addressed to handle the issue of income inequality and working poverty. We discussed about social protection, we discussed about wage policies, we discussed about development of rural economy, we discussed about formalization of employment, we discussed about developing the small and micro enterprises, and so on and so forth. And all these responses have to go hand in hand for handling this subject. Thank you.